In the words of the late Nipsey Hussle, brothers feeling lucky, we should go to Vegas. I know this game took place in New Jersey, but the Devils had some luck on their side thanks to a Tyler Toffoli hat trick to squeak away with a 6-5 victory against the reigning Stanley Cup champions while being shorthanded. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Wasn't the perfect showing, but a win is still a win. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils are for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Now, first and foremost, I know this game was played in Newark, New Jersey. However, given the circumstances, I don't think I'll be able to use this example at any point the rest of the year. So here it goes. We know this old saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I've personally been to Vegas and I enjoyed my time there. Definitely, there's a lot going on in Sin City, but the big thing that happens in Vegas is obviously gambling. And considering the amount of things that were against the New Jersey Devils heading into this matchup against the Vegas Golden Knights, I think a lot of people made bank who picked the Devils to be on the winning end because, let's face it, the Devils are still facing a lot of injuries. They have little to no defense. They have very shaky goaltending, and sometimes you can't really rely solely on your offense to get you out of a hole. Case in point in this game, but the Devils got lucky. That's another word that's used heavily in the city of Vegas, but nonetheless, the Devils pulled away with a victory against the reigning Stanley Cup champions. So in today's episode, in the first segment, I will share some of my key takeaways from the game. We will also talk about Brett Howden's dirty hit on Shimon the Mets. I put that in quotation marks because he wasn't assessed a penalty major. So we'll definitely talk about that a little later in the segment. And then in segment 2, like I do after every post-game recap victory, I will name my 3 stars of the game with some honorable mentions. And then in the third and final segment, like I do with every post-game recap, I will compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade. So going into this matchup, like I said moments ago, the Devils had a lot working against them. So Lindy Ruff revealed that Jack Hughes and Andre Palat are still not back to skating, and there's no real timeline as to when they're going to return. Obviously, there's a big talk as to whether or not Jack Hughes will suit up in the All-Star game that's set to take place in a couple weeks in Toronto, and it hasn't been announced as to whether or not he needs a replacement. Hopefully, Jesper Bratt is given a chance, but we'll discuss that in a future episode. So, obviously, the Devils are missing some key assets, and to add insult to injury, Colin Miller was listed out in this game due to an illness. So I talked about how the Devils had little to no defense. We'll talk about that momentarily, but insert Santeri Hatakka. As you guys know, I am a big fan of Hatakka's game, and I talked about him in the previous episode. I felt as though he was one of the more underrated assets in the Timo Meier trade. And I feel like as the game went on, I think Hatakka was really somewhat decent in the defensive end because I saw him stop the Vegas Golden Knights in their tracks. I saw him get full grasp of the puck, trying to clear it, and he was pretty decent for what he was being given. But that's just what I saw from my vantage point. Now, going into this matchup, like I just said moments ago, the Devils were going to have to rely solely on their offense to try to come away with the upset victory. So every forward was going to have to step up their respective game because the Devils couldn't really rely much on anything else. And I think the top line for New Jersey really came through, centered by Nico Hischier with Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt on his wing. So I'll talk more about those respective players in the second segment, but they were definitely vital. And then that second line of Michael McLeod, Tyler Toffoli, and Dawson Mercer, they came out guns blazing to begin the game, and that definitely set up the offensive tempo for New Jersey. And also, Curtis Lazar had a very productive day at the office. Same with Eric Haula and Nathan Bastian. He was used on the first power play unit. Devils power play has started to sink in recent games. Coming into this matchup, they had the 5th best power play percentage in the entire league, but nonetheless, you get the point, which is the Devils needed to rely solely on their offensive depth in order to come away with this victory, because I think it's safe to say that they had little to no defense. So when we look at their defensive lineup, oh boy, it's pretty horrendous to look at. So your top defensive pairing is Kevin Ball, Shimon the Mets. Okay, so Kevin Ball, he's pretty decent. He's physical. Shimon the Mets focuses solely on the offense. Then that second defensive pairing, Luke Hughes, John Marino. John Marino hasn't really looked all that sharp defensively. In fact, he allowed for Chandler Stevenson to roam right past him and score a goal at one point during the game. And I'm just like, what is it with John Marino not boxing out? He did the exact same thing in the Montreal Canadiens game by allowing Cole Caulfield to go right past him and get a point blank shot. And then Santeri Hataka and Cal Foote. Now, I am perfectly aware that both of them have experience playing in Utica together, but still, would it translate to the NHL? So that defensive unit, I had little to no faith. And in case in point, in which the Devils allowed 5 goals. Speaking of which, goaltending. Now, Bill Spaulding said on air that the point of putting Vitek Vanecek out there, especially against the reigning Stanley Cup champions, is basically just to try to, once again, boost up Vanecek's confidence, because he has taken a couple steps back compared to last year, because it's like, okay, 1 good outing could turn into 2 good outings, then 3 good outings, because in Vanecek's previous game, he was actually pretty solid against the Columbus Blue Jackets, but the Blue Jackets are last in the Metropolitan Division, and the Vegas Golden Knights, I know they're missing Jack Eichel, but they're still the reigning Stanley Cup champions. And also, did you guys know that the Vegas Golden Knights heading into this matchup had dropped 6 straight games on the road? So they were kind of struggling away from T-Mobile Arena, but still, that's not the point. The point is that Vitek Vanecek, he's shaky at best. So it was just like, you're going to get what you get out of the defense and the goaltending. So it was going to have to be a barn burner or bust for New Jersey, because there was no way in hell that they were going to win the game 2-1 or 3-1 in a tight-knit scoring affair. It was going to have to be all gas on the offense and nothing more. But they were able to squeak out that victory. They had to take it into overtime, but still they walked away with the 2 points. But I think the most crucial part of the game was when Lindy Ruff finally utilized a timeout correctly, because when the Golden Knights made it a 4-3 game, remember that was the goal that Stevenson had by getting right past Marino. So that was very smart and strategic on Ruff's end. And because the thing is like, you need to take the momentum out of Golden Knights' sails. And that's why you call a timeout in basketball, or you have the mound visit in baseball. You got to slow down the momentum of your opposition. And that's something that a lot of people have been critical of Ruff for, because it seems like he just allows his team to get butchered out there and it snowballs. But he stopped the snowball somewhat. And now the Golden Knights did make it a 5-3 game later on. But still, it was just like, the Devils just needed to catch their breath. They needed to get their feet underneath them, and they just needed a breather. And I think that timeout goes a longer way than people realize. So it wasn't the cleanest of games for the Devils. It wasn't their best effort, but you got to do what you got to do in order to win games, especially with the amount of personnel that the Devils are missing. Now, this style of hockey is not going to win you championships. It's not going to make you a playoff team, but you need to keep your head above water. So I get that a lot of people want a better showing from the Devils, but considering the circumstances, considering the personnel they're missing, you just got to do what you got to do. So I'm glad that the Devils walked away with 2 points, glad that Tyler Toffoli got a hat trick, and I'm glad that Jesper Bratt had a pretty decent showing as well. So we'll talk about that momentarily, but let's talk about that Brett Howden hit on Shimon the Mets, because that was a big talking point during the game, and luckily Shimon the Mets was able to return. But why wasn't Howden given a penalty major and also ejected from the game? Because Bill Spaulding and Ken Danico brought it up on air. Well, when looking at the replay at a different angle, yes, it looked like Howden left his feet and it looked like he just nudged his shoulder up just a little bit, but I don't think he made contact to the Mets' head. Now, the Mets did get whiplashed and he was brought down to the rink, and Kevin Ball did stand up for him. So I'm glad that Ball was able to do that. But yes, the Mets did take a bit of a hard tumble, but I think the big thing for the referees, and I'm not saying I agree with the call or not, I'm just saying, like, from their perspective, because they have a lot more replay angles up in Toronto, according to Bill Spaulding, is just like Howden's arm, it didn't fully make contact with Nemets's head at one certain angle, but the other angle, it did look like he hit his head. Now, I do think that it did quantify for a major, if you ask me, because he still raised his elbow, he still left his skates, and maybe he didn't make full force contact to the head, but still, it's just the principle of it. So The Devils, I think a lot of people were just concerned because it was just like the Devils can't afford to lose any more players. They're already shorthanded as it is, and they still have a tough schedule ahead of them. So I think Nemets coming back into the game and just basically being a warrior and powering through it, I think it says a lot about the toughness in the Mets. And I'm glad there was no harm, no foul, but it's just the principle of the nature, if you ask me. So personally, I think it did quantify as a penalty major and possibly an ejection. But at the same time, it's just like at least the Mets did come back into the game. And I think the big thing for the referees was that there was just no contact to the dome. So we'll talk more about some players that really stepped up their game for the Devils. And I will give you a full disclosure. Out of all the 5 players I'm going to highlight in the next segment, only one is a defenseman. Can you guess who it is? Well, we'll talk about that momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about eBay Motors. So passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Okay, let's highlight some players that caught my eye in this matchup against the Vegas Golden Knights. So the first honorable mention that I want to list before I give my 3 stars is Timo Meier. So Timo Meier was on the top line alongside with Nico Hischier and Jesper Bratt. And Timo Meier did walk away with a point in this game. He got the primary assist on Nico Hischier's goal, which was a great look by the power forward, because he was just muscling his way near the net of Thompson, and he set up Nico Hischier on a beautiful dime. And I think it's safe to say for Timo Meier, he looks a lot better, because if you guys recall, the first time around when he came back from injury, he was very slow to get back into the swing of things. Then he goes on the injury list once more, and then he comes back, but he's not slow. He's not hindering the offensive attack for the Devils. He's creating good looks for himself and others. And I'm surprised that Timo Meier didn't walk away with more points, because he did have a good couple looks on Thompson himself, and he was setting people up nicely. And the one thing that I liked about Timo Meier is that he's doing what he did last year, especially during the playoffs, which was hanging in front of the net, trying to clean up the loose change and just trying to find the rebound opportunities to maybe give himself a point or help out some other scoring chances for his teammates. But I think Timo Meier has definitely come in full circle since returning from his second injury of the season. And he was a big X factor in this game for New Jersey, especially on that first goal that the Devils had, thanks to their captain, Nico Hischier. Now, my second honorable mention is Jesper Bratt, who also walked away with a point. He got the secondary assist on Nico Hischier's goal, but that doesn't tell the full story as to how well Jesper Bratt played, because according to James Villani, who is the lead editor and writer for Devils Army blog, he put this out on X. He said, Jesper Bratt was absurd tonight, creating 17 shot attempts, 13 scoring chances, and a 0.85 expected goal rate by himself. His trio with Hischier and Meier has a chance to be something going forward too. 24-6 shot attempts, 14-4 shots, 13-6 scoring chances, and a 64.91 expected goals for percentage. So once again, that entire line of Timo Meier, Jesper Bratt, and Nico Hischier stepped up big for New Jersey, and they played a lot of top line minutes. And I think it's no surprise that Nico Hischier is also my third honorable mention, because he got the first goal of the game for the Devils, not before that they let up the first goal to Vegas once more, because that's the name of the game for the Devils. They always give up the first goal, and it's become a meme at this point. But that's not the point. The point is that line of Timo Meier, Jesper Bratt, and Nico Hischier, just beautiful for New Jersey. Now, my third star of the game belongs to Shimon Nemets, because like I said in the first segment, he was a warrior after he got hit by Howden, because he definitely got whiplash and he got shaken up. He was down on the ground. He had to be checked by the trainers, but Nemets still walked away with 2 points of this game. So he got the primary assist on Tyler Toffoli's first goal of the game, and also Curtis Lazar's second goal, which was the game-tying goal. Now, I don't think his pass to Lazar was intentional at all. He banked it off below the goal line, and Lazar was just in the right possible spot to corral the rebound and knock it on in. But still, the fact that Shimon Nemets walked away with a couple points, I think it was a rather impressive performance because, once again, the defense, little to nothing for a Devil, so they had to rely on somebody. And not to mention Luke Hughes also creating some decent looks for himself, especially in overtime. So Shimon Nemets, in my opinion, was the Devils' best defenseman in terms of just creating good looks for himself and his teammates. And like I said, very spread thin when it comes to defensemen for Devils for a time being, especially going up against the reigning Stanley Cup champions, but they made it work. Now, my second star belongs to Curtis Lazar, who walked away with 2 goals, including the game-tying goal in the third period, like I just mentioned moments ago. So Curtis Lazar and his offensive game, I think, is heavily underrated for New Jersey, because I get when the Devils first obtained him, he described it to me when I asked him the question, like, how would you describe your overall game to people who might be unfamiliar with it? He told me meat and potatoes type hockey. But I think his offense is, once again, severely underrated because he walked away with 2 goals and he was on hat trick watch. And the first goal he had was on a centering attempt from Eric Haula. I didn't think he had it in him. And then that second goal that he had in the third period to tie the game, he was just in the right place at the right possible time. So I think that is the quintessential of meat and potatoes hockey, because he's hanging in front of the net, he's waiting for the opportunity, and he muscled it on in. And it's not the first time in which Curtis Lazar came up clutch for the Devils. So I think another example that comes to mind is when the Devils played against the New York Islanders back in late November, when Curtis Lazar also had a clutch goal that I think put the Devils up in front late against the Islanders, because the Devils had to mount a serious comeback against New York. But nonetheless, Curtis Lazar, I think his offensive game is really thriving, and it's no surprise why he's the second star of the game this time around. Now, my first star, it goes to Tyler Toffoli. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. Walked away with a hat trick, had the game-winning goal in OT, and Lindy Ruff saw how hot Toffoli was throughout the course of the game. So according to his post-game press conference, Ruff told Toffoli, like, bring us home. We're going to run the offense through you. So Toffoli came up big for New Jersey, and he was really clutch, not only in OT, but throughout the course of the game, because at one point in the second period, the Devils were down 5-3. They needed a miracle, because after the Devils had a 3-1 lead in the second period, they blew the most infamous lead in all of sports, and they allowed for the Golden Knights to tally up 4 unanswered goals on them. And so the Devils were down 5-3, and they needed a big momentum shift heading into the second intermission of the game. And Tyler Toffoli came through when there was about 15 seconds remaining in the second period, because if the Devils go down 5-3 heading into the third period, I don't think they win this game. They needed some sort of momentum shift to carry them and just have their head held up high, and Tyler Toffoli answered the bell. So Toffoli came up clutch not once, but twice for New Jersey, getting 2 crucial goals, the game-winning goal and also the goal that put the Devils behind just 1 heading into the second intermission. And I think a big talking point for Tyler Toffoli recently is that people have been disappointed in his overall game when Jack Hughes is not in the lineup. Now, I get that sometimes he was inconsistent when Jack Hughes wasn't there. I understood that, but make no mistake, he's a very good player, because I think one of the other things that was getting underneath the skin of some people is that Yegor Sharangovich, he's thriving in Calgary right now. And I'll be the first to admit it. I didn't anticipate for him to have the season that he's having, because he's playing top line minutes. He's on the top PK. He's on the top power play. Basically, the Flames saw something in Yegor Sharangovich that a lot of people didn't see. Well, I always knew he had that spark in him, but I didn't think it would get that big. I didn't think he would be like the main go-to guy for the Flames, but lo and behold, he's been thriving out there. And I'm very happy for Yegor Sharangovich, because he was one of my favorite players for the Devils, especially during that 56-game COVID year, because he was one of the few bright spots for the Devils. He was an energizer. And once Timo Meier came into the picture a couple seasons later, Sharangovich's role, it just got smaller and smaller and smaller, to the point where he was a healthy scratch and would only play if he's replacing an injured player. So Sharangovich wasn't going to be given the role that I think he wanted with the Devils. And even though he was a restricted free agent, I didn't anticipate for the Devils to bring him back. I anticipated for them to move him, or just like try to come to an agreement to let him go to free agency, whatever the case might be. But I didn't anticipate for Sharangovich to be this good for the Flames. But basically, people are saying like, oh man, the Devils lost a trade with Tyler Toffoli. And I'm just like, no, they did not. Tyler Toffoli is a very good player. And now he is leading the Devils in goals with 20. Did you know that? I don't think enough people are talking about that. So I'm glad that Sharangovich is doing really well with the Flames. But make no mistake, Tyler Toffoli has been one hell of a player for the Devils. And now he has his second hat trick this year in a Devils sweater. So I think this trade worked out pretty well for both respective teams because for the Devils, you get a bona fide goal scorer in Tyler Toffoli, who has championship pedigree, a veteran player who brings a lot to the table. And then for the Flames, they get a young, maybe underrated player in Sharangovich, who wasn't really brought up to his full potential while in the Devils sweater, who wasn't going to be given that chance, given, once again, the circumstances that surround the Devils and their mindset moving forward, because they're trying to get back into the playoffs. They're no longer interested in rebuilding. So Tyler Toffoli, one hell of a player for the Devils, and case in point in this game. So we're going to compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade momentarily. But before we continue, I said at the top of the show that Vegas, notoriously known for gambling. So let me tell you about FanDuel, because the NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. So the app is super easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. My Los Angeles Lakers are looking a little bit better, but we'll see what happens. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL or the Taylor Swift League at this point. But make sure you gamble responsibly. Okay, let's compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade, and get out of here. So, shots on goal differential, 38-32 in favor of the Devils. I think it was safe to say that in the third period, and especially in overtime, the Devils were peppering Thompson. But Thompson was standing tall in between the pipes, and I know he allowed 6 goals, but the Devils had to earn all 6 of those goals. Thompson didn't make it easy on them. So I think the Devils just once again relying heavily on their offense to do a boatload of the carrying throughout the course of the game. I think it was the right and only maneuver to do. So the shots on goal differential definitely tells a big story for New Jersey in this case. Face-off percentage, one of the rare times in which the Devils come out on the short end of the stick, 53.8% to the Golden Knights, 46.2% to the Devils. Power play, Golden Knights had no power play opportunities, so the Devils played a very disciplined game, which was also essential because the Devils' PK is not all that good. So you don't want to give the Golden Knights golden chances, no pun intended, to try to get some free points. So Devils had to play a disciplined game, and that's what they did. Wasn't perfect, but I think that's one of the positive highlights I could take away from this matchup. Devils were 0 for 2 in their power play opportunities. Like I said, Devils have fallen to 5th in power play percentage in the entire league. So they got to try to get better in that case. But obviously, when you're missing players like Jack Hughes, Dougie Hamilton, it makes things a little tougher on the man advantage. Hits 11-10 in favor of the Devils. Block shots 17-11 in favor of the Golden Knights. Giveaways, Devils led that department 8-4. Takeaways, Golden Knights led that department 5-4. So if I had to give the Devils a letter grade, if I'm being completely honest, it wasn't the cleanest game in the world. It was not pretty to watch. I'm going to have to give the Devils a C- because once again, relying on your offense, it's not a winning recipe. It's not going to win you playoff games. It's not going to take you to the promised land. You need to have a balanced game. And unfortunately, Vitek Vanacek not sharp in between the pipes. Defense, I get that there's a lot of lack of experience, especially on that third defensive pairing. But still, it doesn't take away from the fact that defense, not really all that great for New Jersey. So not really a recipe for success, but you got to do what you got to do when you're shorthanded like the Devils. So they walked away with the victory. Wasn't pretty to watch, and you can't rely on Tyler Toffoli to get a hat trick night in and night out. But that's what happened. And like I said, whether you're in Vegas or you're playing the Vegas Golden Knights, sometimes you need some luck on your side, especially so those parlays can hit for some people. But let me know what you guys think. What did you think of this matchup against the Golden Knights, and how do the Devils fare going forward? Because the schedule doesn't get that much easier for the Devils moving forward because, like I said, they have the 5th hardest schedule heading into the All-Star break. So they got to take on the Hurricanes on Thursday, then the Lightning on the 27th. So hopefully they can rack up at least one more win so that way they can just keep their head above water in the playoff standings. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how the Devils move going forward. So I predicted for the Devils to win against the Blue Jackets. I predicted for them to lose against the Stars because they always struggle on back-to-backs. But I said the Golden Knights was going to be a tough challenge for them. I said maybe the Hurricanes, they can rack up the win there. Lightning, I was seeing some positivity there. So I was anticipating for the Devils to lose like anywhere from 1 to 2 games during these 3-game span, but they got a big win against the reigning Stanley Cup champions. So we'll see how they fare heading into the All-Star break. And if a team needs a break, it's the Devils because they need to get back to full strength. But anyway, that's all the time I have for you. So leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. So continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.